You're listening to the Health and Happiness Podcast with Travis Kemper and
Lauryn Maxwell. Each episode, we share easy to implement strategies to improve your health, happiness, and overall quality of life.
I still believe that at any time the no talent police will come and arrest me. Mike Myers. How's it going, Lauryn?
It's going good. I survived progress report season again. Woo woo. That was the third one of this year. It was a very, very, very long week, but it's over, and now I have a few days off for spring break this week, so that's super exciting. I'm probably going to sleep and clean. That's my goal.
All right. Sounds so exciting.
So exciting, but it's like stuff that needs to get done that, like when you have a messy house, like your brain just feels messy, so I'm actually really looking forward to it. In other news, Keely turned 2 this week. Her birthday, we gave her a birthday of March 8th because I don't actually know when her birthday is. So that's her birthday, and we're having a puppy party this weekend for her to get her friends together to play. She's going to have so much fun, and honestly, they're probably, some of them are going to start coming over during this episode, so we may have to pause because she will freak out.
Awesome.
How's it going, Travis?
It's good. I'm going skiing today. I'm going to the Flat Tops tomorrow with Duke to go snowshoeing.
Nice.
I hired a new company to take care of my business, social media, website, all that crap that I don't want to do.
Yay!
I'm very excited for that. My disdain for computers has been really slowing my progress.
Disdain,
so it was about
word.
time.
Yeah.
Thank you. Every once in a while, I use a $3 word.
That's a good one.
Yeah. And I've had some awesome patient interactions and experiences in the last few weeks.
Yay!
I finally got some neuro patients, and it's so exciting.
Oh, so fun.
Yes. What are we going to talk about today, Lauryn?
Well, so I was listening to myself talk while I was editing last week's episode, and I heard myself say in the introduction when we talk about what's new in our lives, I heard myself say something to the extent of, I don't know why they think I'm enough of an expert to teach students. And I was like, oh, dang it, it's back again. The imposter syndrome is back again. And Travis also reminded me that on a previous episode, I had said even something like, I'm not a real physical therapist. So, oops, apparently it's been here for a little while. And anyway, I thought it would be a good idea for an episode because it's something I'm clearly constantly battling, and most people I've talked to have had some feelings of imposter syndrome as well. So we're going to talk about imposter syndrome.
All right. So what is imposter syndrome? Imposter syndrome describes high-achieving individuals who, despite their successes objectively, they fail to internalize their accomplishments and have persistent self-doubt and fear of being exposed as a fraud or imposter, just like Mike Myers.
Yeah.
People with imposter syndrome struggle with accurately attributing their performance to their actual competence. They attribute successes to external factors such as luck or receiving help from others, and attribute setbacks as evidence of their personal inadequacy. Most people experience some self-doubt when facing new challenges. That's where I get it, Lauryn.
Yeah.
But someone with imposter syndrome has an all-encompassing fear of being found out, to not have what it takes, even after experiencing outward signs of success.
I feel like you're describing me to a T.
Yeah, you're the straight A's, Lauryn. I think at any level, you should look at yourself and be like, oh man, I was a really, really good student.
I mean, I think I can say that now because I'm not a student anymore, but definitely not during that.
So what is the prevalence of imposter syndrome? Some studies have tried to determine it, but they've varied widely from 9 to 82%.
It's like the widest range I've ever seen.
Yeah, so the prevalence studies are not up to snuff yet. So we'll have to wait a couple years until we know what the actual prevalence is. But I think that most people have some sort of imposter syndrome
Yeah.
at some point.
Yeah.
Um, they've also studied if it's more likely in men or women. Some studies have found that it's more likely in women, while other studies have found no differences between men and women. So yeah, everybody can experience it.
Mm-hmm.
Age does not seem to be a determining factor.
Which is
Some stuff.
honestly really, sorry to interrupt you, honestly really interesting because, like, in my brain, I would think, oh, like, the older I am, the more experience I have, and then, like, the more this would go away. But that's not true.
It was so sad. You were just waiting until you hit that
Yeah,
age.
I was really hoping there was, just like a cutoff, like, oh, okay, I got it now.
Um, race and ethnicity possibly play a role. Some studies have found that imposter syndrome is more common among minority students. And it's often found that people with imposter syndrome also experience depression and anxiety.
Yes. So, I'm going to go over a little bit about how context and social structure can help to create imposter feelings. I think a lot of um, research talks about how this is a very like individual thing. And it talks about, like personality traits and things that like go along with an imposter syndrome, so like very much like on the individual level, but there are like society does play a role. So I think that is probably like makes common sense, but also I thought we should talk about it. So, in our society, there's a huge pressure to achieve, and there can be a lot of confusion between approval and love and worthiness, which I think we talked about a little bit on a previous episode too. Yeah. Self worth becomes contingent on achieving with imposter syndrome. So,
Yeah, that's
wow.
exactly what we talked about with regards to you. You talked about
Yes,
that.
yeah. I didn't say it in those terms, but that's exactly what I said, essentially. Yeah.
Yeah, that your self-love and approval from adults was contingent on your grades or something like
Yeah,
that was
yeah.
pretty much it as you
Yes.
were a student.
Yes. So, society and culture at large. At the societal level, research suggests that an individual's position in the social hierarchy can play an important role in shaping his or her imposter feelings, including how the specific challenges and stressors that accompany a lower societal position can make one feel like an imposter. So, for example, research suggests that a woman's awareness of such stereotypes, such as men being better leaders, can trigger her to feel like an imposter. And again, this may be why there's mixed evidence about a gender effect of imposter syndrome, because if a woman is not necessarily aware of those stereotypes, she may not feel, as much of an imposter as somebody who is very aware of those stereotypes. At the institutional level within corporate organizations, educational or government institutions, women and ethnic minority groups are, for instance, more likely to occupy particular professions. So, for example, they are underrepresented in surgery but overrepresented in nursing. Particular roles within an organization. So, for example, they are underrepresented in information technology but overrepresented in human resources, and particular levels of organizational hierarchies. So, for example, they are underrepresented in leadership positions but overrepresented at more junior levels. They often lack role models and are paid less for the work they do, which can elicit doubts about one's suitability for these occupations and positions.
I find this a little interesting because I am a man in a female dominated field.
Mm-hmm.
And I have heard others, not necessarily physical therapists, but definitely nurses, male nurses who like get upset that patients will make comments
Mm-hmm.
about the fact that they're a male nurse. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I literally wouldn't care at all
Yeah.
if that happened to me. Like that
Yeah.
wouldn't affect me at all
Yeah.
because I made the choice to be, a physical therapist. So
Right.
you can say I'm in a girl's profession all you want. It's not going to affect me.
Yeah, that's interesting for sure. I also like, I think before I really knew a whole lot about physical therapy, I was surprised that that was a like women dominated field. Like that didn't strike me as something that was going to be a women dominated field. So
I think it's something like 75%. It's
it
probably going
is.
down.
Yeah. I mean, like, clearly it is. But like I said before, I knew a whole lot about it. Like, I would have assumed it was like a man's dominated field, a men dominated field.
I remember going into it when I was applying for schools. Um, I was looking at the GPAs and I was like, man, I don't know if I'm going to get in because my GPA is not as high as, I think the average in our class was something like 3.7 and mine was
Yeah.
3.3. And that was pretty much that all of them were pretty much above 3.5 across the
Mm-hmm.
country. And I remember saying something to my dad, and my dad looked at me, he said, "Yeah, but you got a big thing going for you." And I said, "What's that?" And he said, "You're a guy and it's a female dominated field and they want men in that field." And I don't know
Mm-hmm.
why he knew that, but he was 100% right. And that's
Yeah.
probably part of the reason that I got into our class, because with my GPA that was substantially lower than most people.
Yeah. Could be for sure. Yeah, I like get super excited. There was a guy who's applying for a position in our company, and he like my boss is the only male in our entire company of like 50 something employees. And
Wow.
so there's one physical therapist who's applying for our job right now, and all of us are like, there's gonna be a guy peds PT. Like that's so exciting. Anyway.
I I had the same experience when I did that internship in the schools in Flagstaff. Um, all of the teachers
Uh-huh.
and all of the therapists, like, because I worked under three different therapists, they were like,
Right.
"Oh man, it's so good to have a male presence here because these kids, they, especially if they're a single parent household, which
Sure.
a
When it's
decent number of
usually
them are,
yeah,
um, they have almost no
male
male."
figures in their life.
Yes, and some of them attached to me almost instantly. Um,
Oh,
Partially because of that, probably.
yeah.
Partially because I'm just an attachable
I mean,
figure,
you are.
obviously.
Clearly. I knew it the second I saw your face.
Right, clearly.
That's not an exaggeration. Um, anyway, back to what we were talking about. At an interpersonal level, research suggests that how people are treated by self relevant others is an important precursor to imposter feelings. Basically, saying that, like, people who are, like, I guess, like, doing, like, in your job or in your whatever, in the same career path or in the same societal level as you are, how they treat you. Like, if they treat you like you're an equal or if they treat you like you're lesser than, like, obviously that's going to impact how you feel about yourself.
Yeah. Um, so we found an interesting study that we just wanted to make a note on, comparing imposter syndrome in traditional students versus online students,
Mm-hmm.
or specifically graduate students. And it was higher in traditional students, which, when you actually think about it, makes sense. You're surrounded by a bunch of people. And I remember, like, you always look at the people around you and you're like, huh, how does this person do all of this and still get through this class
Mm-hmm.
and run their marathons and stuff,
Oh, yeah, that was very real
constantly.
in PT school.
Yeah, yeah, there was one person in particular. It's like, how are you one of the best runners in the country
Yeah,
and you
like,
have three kids and you're going through the same class as me? I don't understand your life.
I don't understand it. Yeah, incredible. I mean, he's gone on to be, like, continuously an incredible human being, but, like,
Yeah.
man, when you're sitting next to him in PT school, you're like, I don't belong here.
Right, right. Yeah, that definitely happens. So online, you wouldn't know that person very well, so it
Yeah.
wouldn't be that big of a deal. So it kind of does make sense, but I thought it was interesting. There's a lot of literature that describes the harmful association between imposter feelings and job performance, job satisfaction, and burnout among various employee populations, including healthcare. This isn't that surprising. Um, if you're constantly feeling like you're not good enough, you're going to burn out. You're not going to be satisfied. And those two things are going to lead to bad poor job performance.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a meta-analysis found that people with imposter syndrome aggressively pursue achievement while not being able to accept recognition when their success is achieved. Therefore, true success can never really be achieved because this person is undeserving in their own mind and needs to aggressively pursue more achievement in order to be successful,
Yeah,
really.
but it's a vicious cycle because then like you pursue more achievement and then you contribute it to, external factors, and then you just rinse. What is it? What is shower, rinse, repeat?
Yeah, yeah. Um, Employees who persistently question their professional legitimacy may also be at higher risk of experiencing adverse psychological outcomes with implications for career retention and advancement. When employees with imposter syndrome are faced with more responsibility and less supervision, their symptoms of self-doubt and fears of being exposed as a fraud have been shown to increase. I definitely had some of that in my past. I don't have that
Really?
anymore. Yeah, for sure. Outside
Yeah.
sales, when I first got into outside sales, I always felt like I wasn't doing enough, and it led me to 100-hour weeks, um, and feeling like I'm a failure. And then I found out at the end of the year that I had recruited more students than the two people that were in the state of Arizona the year before combined. And I was
Wow.
like, man, you just stressed for an entire year for nothing.
Yeah, but what's interesting about that, because then you probably weren't likely to repeat, is you like actually had that higher level cognition of like the stress isn't the thing that made me successful, because I feel like imposter syndrome can be that like, oh well, that was the reason that I had success is because I stressed so much about it, so now I'm just gonna redo
Oh,
that stress and keep doing that anyway.
versus I had that self-awareness at that point to realize that, like, oh, I was achieving. I
Like
was
I
stressing
could
for
do
no
this.
reason.
Yeah.
I made my life more miserable than it needed to be. I don't need to do this anymore,
Yeah,
like that.
hashtag
Yeah.
PT school is hard. Lauren makes it harder. That's what that reminds me of. Anyway, sorry.
So they also made a note in one of the studies saying that since the COVID-19 pandemic, healthcare professionals and employees of companies who have had to reduce their workforce may be experiencing both of these circumstances. Um, Additionally, employees who remain at work with a reduced workforce due to the financial crisis resulting from the pandemic may face survivor guilt, which has also been associated with imposter syndrome. I didn't have any of this going on. I was just questioning why patients weren't allowed to come see me. That was
Yeah,
all that I was questioning.
the thing that I think I related to, I don't think I had like survivor guilt or anything. But the thing that I relate to out of this sentence is the fact that like I guess more like was something you said before, like being on your own and having that high responsibility, but not being like, what did you say? Where was it?
Self-doubt and fears of being exposed as a fraud are shown to
Yeah,
increase
more
with more
responsibility with less
responsibility and less
supervision.
supervision.
That's the
Yep,
thing. So, like, my job is
that
kind
is
of
your
that.
job.
Like,
Yeah.
regardless of whether we're in a pandemic, I can see how that's relevant, like, because, people are working from home. But that's my job in general. Like, I'm
Yeah.
out by myself all the time, and I have a lot of responsibility, and I clearly have some imposter syndrome based on the things that have come out of my mouth on these episodes of this podcast. So I can definitely see how that's relevant for sure.
Lauryn,
Ah,
how can we cope?
yeah, good question. Lots of strategies for coping. So one of them is change your thinking, reframe the way that you think about your achievements. So as we kind of mentioned, a lot of people with imposter syndrome become almost superstitious, and that fuels imposter syndrome. So unconsciously, they think their successes must be due to the self torture, like the stress that you're putting into getting you to where you are. And afraid of being discovered as a fraud, people with imposter feelings go through contortions to do a project perfectly. And then when they succeed, it kind of repeats that cycle over and over again. So work to break that cycle. Set like boundaries on yourself. This was an example that was like in an article that we read, was like spend 10 hours on an assignment. Oh, if you normally spend 10 hours on an assignment, cut it back to 8, which like I feel like reading that from Travis's brain, you're like, why would I ever spend 10 hours on an assignment?
Why would
But
I
reading,
ever spend 8 hours?
right. But reading it from my brain, I would be like, oh gosh, you want me to cut 2 hours off?
That's 20% less time. I'm gonna get a B.
I'm gonna get an F. So yeah, that's one of the strategies for sure. Talk to somebody who can help. I mean, this, like go to a counselor, go to therapy if it's like really pervasive and affecting like every part of your life. Learn the facts, monitor your internal dialogue, ask yourself how you might support a friend who minimizes their accomplishments, and then apply that same supportive language to your own narration. This one's a big one for me. Like I feel like come for my friends and I will fight you, but like come for me and I play dead. So I have to apply that same logic to like, I'm my own best friend. I need to treat myself like it. Share your feelings. Sharing your imposter feelings with others can not only reduce loneliness, but also open doors for others to share what they see in you. By definition, most people with imposter feelings suffer in silence. Most people don't talk about it because part of the experience is that you're afraid that you're going to be found out or caught. So you don't want people to know. Yeah, so that's
I like how you're laughing about it as you're reading it, because it clearly relates to you and how you perceive things, but you're laughing about it because it's so silly when you read it.
It's so silly. It's like one of those things that I'm like, Lauren, come on, but also like, I don't know, this is just my brain. But anyway, that's a big eye-opening thing for me. Is I like had after school, I think I had started talking about imposter syndrome to other people. One of them being my aunt, who is like a highly successful woman in a very, very male-dominated field. I think she's in, oh gosh, like computer software engineering.
Oh,
something like that. And she's like the only woman in her entire like company. And I was telling her that I like felt imposter syndrome going into my job after graduating from grad school, and she was like, Lauren, I feel imposter syndrome too. Like sometimes it just doesn't go away. That doesn't mean you're an imposter. That doesn't mean you're not like capable of doing this job. It just is a feeling. And I was like, oh, like who knew? Other people felt like that. Celebrate your successes. So if someone congratulates you, don't move on too fast. Pay attention to how you respond and aim to speak more positively about yourself. Concrete reminders are also important. For example, if you receive an email with positive feedback, save or print it. I do that one sometimes.
Oh, good.
Let go of perfectionism. Perfectionism is a personality trait that does go hand in hand, I think, with imposter syndrome. So focusing on your progress rather than aiming for perfection. It's good enough to be good enough is one quote I read a long time ago that's really stuck with me, and I have to remind myself quite often. Cultivate self-compassion. Use mindfulness to shift from an external locus of self-worth to internal one. That can help you let go of perfectionism. Share your failures. Discussing failures in a group can help. This seemed like when I first read this, I was like, I would never.
Instant anxiety.
Yeah, it's terrifying, but this makes sense to me. Sharing failures in a group can help paint a more realistic portrait of what other people are struggling with and helps you realize that everyone else isn't perfect either. Wow. Yeah, I can see how that would help. And accept it. Remember that imposter feelings can arise with any career shift at any time, especially if the people you are surrounded by have different achievements than you.
Yeah. So success in addressing it is going to result from supporting our internal constructs and can be helped through focus on growing positivity, adopting a growth mindset, practicing visualization, positive self-talk, or at least catching your negative self-talk,
Yeah.
positive affirmations like we talked about before, mindfulness, positive coping mechanisms. Just one thing, that I've learned in my life is that, like, I made the choices to be where I'm at.
Mm-hmm.
Positive or negative, they're my fault.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that helps me a lot,
Mm-hmm.
in knowing, like it, you can call it luck. That's fine. Somebody else can call it luck. I don't care. I made the choices to be where I'm at,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm here because of those choices. So
Right.
I find that powerful for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
Lauren, you
that's
have anything you want to add?
yeah, there was an article that we read that had a couple of tests and some great worksheets for like ways to work through this, and some podcasts too that talk about imposter syndrome and how to cope, that I think could be really helpful if you are struggling with it. So look for those in the show notes.
Awesome. Great job today, Lauren.
You too, Travis. Thanks for having this conversation with me.
Great choice of topic today, Lauren.
Thank you. Yeah. Who knew? I'm struggling with this currently, apparently.
Thanks for listening, everybody. And we'll talk to you again next week on another episode.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to listen to this episode of the Health and Happiness Podcast. We hope you enjoyed the episode and are getting benefits from our content.
If your life is improving in part due to the information in this podcast, we would greatly appreciate you sharing the episode with your family and friends on social media and leaving us a review so we can continue to reach more people and improve the health and happiness of the community at large.
Thanks again, and we will see you next week for another episode of the Health and Happiness Podcast.